I don't like snow. It's cold and wet and slippery, and it gets everywhere, but that's never stopped me from having a great time playing the mission Cliffhanger in Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2. In many ways, it's very much a pseudo-sequel to the mission All Ghillied Up from the original Modern Warfare, and in others, it's definitely its own thing, layering a few new tricks on top of the familiar format. After my previous video chatting about All Ghillied Up, you may not be surprised to learn that it's my favourite mission in Modern Warfare 2, and in this video, I'm going to talk a little bit more about why. From the original Modern Warfare onwards especially, there's a continual increase in the Call of Duty series' action-packed cinematic qualities, and the contrast in openings between Cliffhanger and All Ghillied Up illustrates just how quickly Infinity Ward began to increase the intensity. All Ghillied Up kicks things off with a simple but incredibly effective scene as Macmillan rises from the ground ahead of you, whereas Cliffhanger is certainly a little more Hollywood in its approach, as you're tasked with climbing a mountain alongside Soap in order to reach your destination. Much of the sequence involves little more than using two buttons to clamber your way to safety, but even so, it's hard not to get at least somewhat sucked in by the spectacle of it all.
Hold on! Don't let go!
And there's also some fantastic quotes included should you somehow manage to mess things up. Reaching firmer ground, you're introduced to the heartbeat sensor, a new addition to the series, and begin infiltrating the nearby Russian base. Where Cliffhanger's high-octane start is a very different experience from All Ghillied Up, your first encounter with a group of enemies will probably feel far more familiar. Here's how it plays out in All Ghillied Up.
He's down. Good night. Move.
And here's Cliffhanger's take.
Roach, these muppets have no idea we're here. Let's take this nice and slow. You take the one on the left. On three. 1, 2, 3.
Highly original it is certainly not, but nevertheless, these moments, and others like them, where you team up to take down enemies, are always the ones which make me feel most like part of a well-trained, coordinated squad. In terms of overall mission structure, however, the two levels deviate massively in how events play out from this point onwards, and this is where Cliffhanger really comes into its own. Soap retires to a ridge to provide overwatch, and you begin sneaking your way deeper and deeper inside the airbase. And this section is fantastic. The snowstorm engulfing the area combined with your heartbeat sensor gives you everything you need to reach your objective without causing a ruckus, and you're then left to decide exactly how you're going to reach your objective. While the map you're faced with isn't an overly large one, you're given plenty of options for how to approach things. The most obvious paths are to the left of the area or straight ahead of you, with each offering a different challenge. If you head left, then you're going to need to keep your wits about you as you weave in and out of and in between buildings, while heading straight forwards leads you to a vantage point from which you can get a much better view of the area as a whole. You can also head straight down the middle of the base and take advantage of a raised platform you can crawl under, although this is the hardest of the three routes, and as such, I don't recommend it. It's also worth noting that whichever path you choose, a jeep will also make its rounds as you continue to explore, but given how much cover is on offer across the base and how inobservant its occupants seem to be, it's never anything more than a minor inconvenience, which is a bit of a shame. The guards are also monumentally stupid. During one playthrough, I shot my way through the entire area with little care paid to who I was killing or how many enemies became suspicious, and yet I was never in any real danger of being properly discovered. To make your time traversing the base even easier, Soap will occasionally help out by eliminating guards blocking your way. Although you can also beat him to the punch if you're quick enough. And there's also several other parts of the mission where Soap will respond accordingly depending on your actions. He is none too impressed if you decide to let him do all the work taking out the two-man patrols near the beginning of the mission, reacting with frustration at first.
Roach, these muppets have no idea we're here. Let's take this nice and slow. You take the one on the left. On three. 1, 2, 3. I guess I have to do everything.
Followed by genuine annoyance.
You take the one on the left. On three. 1, 2, 3. This is easier when you do some of the work.
He'll also chime in if for some reason you decide to destroy the Jeep in the middle of the area.
Well, I wonder if they'll notice a flaming wreck in the middle of the road.
And his dialogue also changes if you're discovered on your way to meet him. Here's what he says if you're a slippery beggar who doesn't get caught.
Take the scenic route, eh? Let's go.
And here's his dialogue if you're less subtle.
Brought some friends with you.
These examples do a great job of making it feel like the mission is less linear than it actually is, like events have changed in some way depending on the course of action you take, but they are also in some ways a bit of a letdown. What All Ghillied Up did so brilliantly in the original Modern Warfare was combine your partner's differing reactions with slight deviations in how the mission played out. For example, you could choose to kill these two guards or sneak right past them, and depending on your choice, you'd need to slightly alter your route accordingly. Cliffhanger without doubt gives you far more freedom in the way you approach its middle section, but at the same time it loses some of that scripted magic found so abundantly in its predecessor. While Soap will react verbally to your actions, very little actually ever changes in world, with things really only differing depending on whether you're hidden or have alerted the guards. I suppose, in a way, you're swapping the heavily scripted diversions featured in All Ghillied Up, made possible because of how tight a leash you're kept on, for a more freeform, but in my view also less immersive stealth experience in Cliffhanger. Whether you prefer the former or the latter will be a matter of personal taste to some degree, but I personally would have loved to have seen a few more of the flourishes Infinity Ward executed so perfectly in All Ghillied Up recreated within Cliffhanger. Considering how much I love the mission in general, however, this is but a minor gripe, and bearing in mind its less scripted nature allowed Infinity Ward to craft a much wider range of gameplay scenarios within one level, I think it's probably a fair trade-off. The number one reason why I enjoy Cliffhanger so much is its pacing, and it is managed to perfection. Events start out slowly enough with the section on the side of the mountain and the initial infiltration of the base. The pace then picks up as you're left to your own devices for a time while heading to a fuel depot to plant explosives, before you reunite with Soap and reach the mission's midpoint.
Roach, I've been compromised. Keep a low profile and hold your fire. Roach, go to plan B. 4.
Which you can of course also fail should you not know how to count.
Roach, go to plan B. 4. 3. 2. 1.
And events then become considerably more explosive as you're forced to shoot your way out of the base before taking to a snowmobile to reach your extraction point. Cliffhanger manages to smoothly up the stakes throughout its 15-minute or so runtime, to the point where even the snowmobile chase near its conclusion ends up feeling like a somewhat natural progression from earlier events. With that being the case, the reason why it's so easy to stay hidden during the stealth sequence begins to make a lot more sense. If you got caught and were forced into a large combat encounter, it would have taken some of the edge off everything that happens following the standoff between Soap and the Russians. It is meant to be the moment where everything goes bang, so to speak, the point in the mission where proceedings fully transition from stealth to combat, and so ensuring that change was felt as acutely as possible was of the utmost importance. If you'd already been involved in pitched battles across the airbase prior to Soap's discovery, then doing the same again after wouldn't have had quite the same impact, whereas suddenly being pushed to go in all guns blazing after a period of relative calm makes the shift feel all the more frantic, which is likely how it would have felt if you were in that exact same situation. The fight out of the airbase is your bread and butter Call of Duty set piece as you push forwards while taking down an almost unreasonable number of enemies. Having to fight your way through the area post-snowstorm is a nice touch, allowing you to better observe the results of your handiwork firsthand, but beyond that and the enemies riding snowmobiles, which are admittedly a unique inclusion, there's little during this sequence you won't have seen before. What you definitely will not have seen before is the set piece which follows immediately after. Escaping down a nearby slope, you'll take out the remaining enemies on your tail before being assaulted by another group of bad guys driving snowmobiles, and after removing them from the equation, you get the opportunity to take to the wheel, so to speak, of one yourself. And this is where one of the most ridiculous sections in the entire game begins. Racing across the snow to your extraction point is pure James Bond-esque action, and I absolutely love it. Is it realistic? Absolutely not. Is it incredibly entertaining? Undoubtedly. Mechanically, it's a very simple sequence. There's never much risk of you crashing due to how wide even the narrowest parts of the section are, and using your weapons requires very little thought. Simply look in the same general area as your adversaries and hold down fire, and Bob's your uncle. To put it in simpler terms, the combat side of the snowmobile section almost functions as a quick time event of sorts. Whenever an enemy appears on screen, you need to hit the appropriate button, even if there's no prompt, and the problem quickly goes away. The only difficult part of the set piece is arguably the final run down a hill prior to the jump across a rather large chasm, but if you hold your nerve and drive almost in a straight line, it's fairly easy to come out of things unscathed to end the mission. Cliffhanger may not be the first mission in the Call of Duty series to do stealth gameplay alongside a partner in a modern setting, but at the same time, it does more than enough to justify its existence, and acts as an excellent sequel of sorts to Modern Warfare's All Ghillied Up. It may not include as much of the phenomenal scripting and atmosphere that made its predecessor such an enthralling affair, however, what it lacks in that side of things, it more than makes up for in spectacle, continually ramping up the action until it's moving quite literally at breakneck pace. To go from sneaking to shooting to snowmobiling in one mission may sound like a lot, but because Infinity Ward dictates the pace of the mission so beautifully, it never feels like too much. Whether you're looking for more stealth action or some James Bond level theatrics, Cliffhanger has you covered, and because of that variety and the aforementioned pacing, it's a mission I still have a whale of a time playing even 12 years after its release. Thanks for watching the video, boys, girls and soldiers. If you had a good time, do consider liking, subscribing and letting me know your thoughts, and fingers crossed we'll meet again soon.